ערב טוב, good evening ladies and gentlemen. ברוכים הבאים לפסטיבל הסופרים והסופרות הבינלאומי במשכנות שאננים בתמיכת הקרן לירושלים. האירוע הזה הוא חלק משיתוף פעולה לקידום ספרות אירופית עכשווית בין האיחוד האירופי ופסטיבל הסופרים הבינלאומי במשכנות שאננים. תודה גם למכון גותה על התמיכה באירוע הספציפי הזה הערב. Good evening and welcome to the International Writers Festival at Mishkenot She'ananim, supported by the Jerusalem Foundation. This event is part of a promote contemporary European literature, is part of a collaboration to promote contemporary European literature between the European Union and the International Writers Festival at Mishkenot She'ananim. We would also like to thank the Goethe Institute for supporting this event. My name is Stefan Litz, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest from Germany, Mr. Volker Weydermann. Volker is author of non-fiction books, mostly dealing with figures in the history of literature. He is also a literary critic who worked and is still working for the most influential German newspapers and journals, among them the Frankfurter Allgemeine Sonntagszeitung, der Spiegel, and currently for the weekly Die Zeit. Among his 9 published books, I would like to mention the 3 outstanding ones that, according to my choice, forgive me. First, a biography about the Swiss writer Max Frisch, published in 2010. The essay Ostende 1936, published in German in 2014, which will be in the focus of our event today. And most recently, a book about the relationship between Thomas Mann and the sea, published in 2024. The book Ostende 1936, Summer of Friendship, which you can see here in the German original edition and the Hebrew one, is about a historic encounter of central figures of German-speaking literature that occurred in summer 1936 in the Belgian coastal town of Ostend. The book was translated into a number of languages and recently, finally, also into Hebrew, published under the title קיץ של חברות 1936, Ostende, by Afar-Semon Publishers, and it was translated by Ereswalk. Volker, since probably not all of our guests here tonight are familiar with your book, let's talk a bit about the main figures in your reconstruction of this remarkable encounter in summer 1936. Stefan Zweig, Joseph Roth, Irmgard Coyne, Ernst Toller, Egon Erwin Kisch. Why did these rather remarkable and then very famous authors convene in Ostend, and what was their situation?
Let's think about it. Well, first of all, thanks very much for coming. I'm really so proud to be here and to have my book being translated into Hebrew. Thanks very much to Joaf Reis, who is here. I'm really, really glad about having Ostende being published here. And I'm really glad to be with you on my side. If you, I had the chance like one day ago with Stefan Litt to have a look at this fabulous National Library and the treasures there. And yeah, well, to make a light way to it, and I had the big chance, well, to see many books, many archives, and I saw a very special letter, what was for me some kind of the beginning of dealing with Stefan Zweig, or actually dealing, well, working or having my life pretty much dealing with literature at all, and especially literature from Jewish authors. And this is the letter some of you might know, the farewell letter of Stefan Zweig, that is in the National Library, Declaração, it is called, from 1942. And yeah, it was some kind of a magical moment for me to see the original letter shown by you, Stefan. Yeah, so this is a kind of a circle that I want to draw. Yeah, these people have been extremely successful writers in Germany, in Central Europe during that time. Not all of them have been successful as Stefan Zweig, but and this book, and I've been writing one book before about the burning of the books in May 33. From that moment on, it is still today, it is so surprising that a kind of modern society with a vivid cultural and literary life from one day to another decides, or students decide, or the intellectuals decide to burn and ban the most popular, the best written, most interesting books on a public place. Yeah, so and all these guys who met there in Ostend had made the experience of exile, some of them earlier, some later, and they came to Ostend. I mean, there are many well-known exile places that we know now, especially Sanaré-sur-Mer, one of the most famous in the southern French coasts, but Ostend wasn't an exile place to stay. Ostend was just a place for one summer, because it was close to Paris, it was not too hard to get visas there, and it was cheap, and they all came together, and yeah, this is some kind of the situation.
Yes, so the atmosphere, you mentioned correctly that this is an occurrence of just one summer. Whereas in the capital of the German exile literature in Sanaré-sur-Mer, it happened actually for a number of summers between 1933 in the beginning and then ongoing until close to the breakout of World War II. And the two main figures, you describe also some others in your book, the two main figures are of course Stefan Zweig and Joseph Roth, who were surprisingly friends, despite the fact that they were rather different in, I mean, maybe not in their success, because Joseph Roth was also quite successful author then and is still published today and is pretty well known. But when you have a look at their personal lives and how they dealt with their personal lives, I think there's a huge gap between the two then. On the one side, you have this cosmopolite Stefan Zweig, who is at home everywhere, who is speaking like 5 or 6 languages and was well off, and on the other end, and he knew how to manage his own life almost until the end, when he got really frustrated. And on the other side, Joseph Roth, who was wrecking himself systematically and by drinking too much alcohol. And what would you say was the connection between these different personalities?
Mm-hmm. They were so different and they were so dense, and their friendship was so intense that sometimes I had the feeling that I'm more or less writing a kind of a love story, actually, because Joseph Roth once tells it, I actually don't know the English word, Nabelschnur der Freundschaft. So the what's the Nabelschnur in English? We don't know.
Well, Taboo.
Okay.
In Hebrew, I don't.
So this might lead to some kind of a mother and child connection too, but on the other side, some kind of physically combination between those both of them. Obviously, they were not homosexual, but it was just such an intense relationship over many years. And what the attraction is, you never know when you talk about love. But it's special. I mean, there are very rarely real friendship among authors at all, because obviously everybody thinks he is the genius. There can't be a second one on my side. But they were really intense. Although Stefan Zweig was more successful, more healthy, he was born rich, and Joseph Roth, came from a very poor family, didn't know his father, and really made his way up and up and up. But one important point of this friendship was admiration of the work, actually. Especially Stefan Zweig was so much in admiration, and he knew he is more successful in the world, but he knew this is maybe not correct. There's one genius among us, and this is Joseph Roth. Stefan Zweig always was, I mean, he was self-aware and was self-conscious, but he was always open to find somebody else more literary, higher ranked than himself. And Joseph Roth was dependent on Stefan Zweig financially, but it was no problem for him. He still could absolutely harsh and direct criticize the work of Stefan Zweig. There was one nice sentence, your love to metaphors are tyrannizing you, he said. Well, it's quite a nice description for the sometimes a bit flowerish style of Stefan Zweig. So they were really, it was a working friendship, it was a financial dependency, and it was, and they, in Ostende they even worked together. They even had, we might talk about it later, they even, in the same book, they were working on the same literary piece, maybe.
Yes. I found it also remarkable that you see, actually Joseph Roth was, of course, mainly until 1933, quite successful and had some nice incomes from publishing his books, which declined after 1933 since Germany as the main market for German-speaking books was cancelled for him and for many other authors of this exile community. But you can also see whenever Zweig gave him money, and that happened quite often, he was, I think, simply unable to deal in an organized way with money. So it came and it disappeared at the same speed. And he also, Joseph Roth, liked very much a very sophisticated style of living, which did not really match his personal situation, I would say, but he didn't care.
Yeah, that's what you say. I mean, he said, "I'm a genius, so I should wear the best suit that is suitable." Yeah, and he was not only spending the money for himself, but he was really very generous. He was giving it away. Yeah, as you said, he couldn't deal with it. The money just didn't stay with him, but it was no problem because he had his friend on his side. So why not spending it to people who need it more than himself?
Yeah. I think this is something that characterizes Stefan Zweig in general, because Joseph Roth was not the only one who was depending on him. He was very generous and was always willing to support others who were in a very harsh and complicated situation after 1933, and we know that there were many of those. Are you able to maybe read us a bit about these relationship, or this relationship from your book? Did you find some good
I will try. I don't know if I
yes.
find some, yeah. And this is actually, I mean, Volk, I think the translator is not here today, right? Because, okay, he's not here, so, but thanks to him anyway. Well, I mean, this book has been seen in many languages. I'm really proud, and this one that I'm reading of now has been translated by the fabulous Carol Janeway. Some of you might know her, an American publisher and translator who did such an amazing job that I got so incredible reviews in the UK and US, among them saying it sounds like Hemingway. And I must say, I didn't hear this from the German original. So it can be, oh, I'm absolutely sure actually that is part of it is definitely from Carol, who actually passed away before this book has been published. So, Carol, thanks a lot. This psalm, well, let's try. This summer, that man from Brody in the far east of the empire, is living right nearby. And so I have to explain already something, because Stefan Zweig was the first time in Ostend in summer 1914, just before the First World War began, and he was, like many other German-speaking intellectuals by that time, absolutely patriotic, German patriotic, favoring of the war. And one sentence was, by that time, because the war obviously began also in the East, I don't care about Brody. I don't even know where Brody is. My heart goes with Interlaken. Yeah, and Brody is this city from the very, very end of the monarchy where Joseph Roth has been born. For a few months, he has left Paris for Amsterdam, and at the end of May, he writes to Stefan Zweig, "You must realize that everyone, everywhere, has a relative, a mother, a brother, a cousin. But I come from a very long way away, and I don't even know the names of my relatives in the East anymore. And if they are still alive, they are certainly living in absolute penury. What am I to do? I have to treat you as my brother. I beg you, allow me to speak you just like a brother. Joseph Roth has reached the end. By comparison with him, Stefan Zweig's problems are in the realm of luxury. Immediately after the Nazis took power in Germany, Roth's books were banned. Nor does he want them to be available anymore. Hell reigns, he writes to Zweig. He also says there can be no compromises with the enemy. Anyone who continues to have business in Germany, anyone who so much as maintains any connections to Germany is a monster. He regards Zweig's decision to keep his books on sale in Germany via the Reichner publishing operation as a betrayal. In May 1936, after it has become clear that Zweig's books will no longer be able to be sold there either, a jubilant Roth writes, I congratulate you on being banned in Germany. These two men have been bound for years by a remarkable love. Zweig, the elder by 13 years, owner of a castle, man of the world, best-selling author, and Roth, successful journalist, feature writer in the 1920s for the Frankfurter Zeitung, author of not very successful documentary novels, inhabitor of hotel rooms, drinker, gregarious, generous, garrulous, always surrounded by friends, audiences, and hangers-on. When finally he wrote Job and Radetzky Marsh, novels that would in any rational world have brought him both fame and fortune, his books were banned and burned, and he went into exile. He is an unhappy man, clear-sighted and angry, and he seeks salvation in the past, in old Austria and its monarchy, its empire that took him, the fatherless Jew who grew up so far from the great glittering capital, and raised him up and opened the world to him. A state that was a universe that encompassed many different peoples without distinguishing between them, and in which one could travel freely without a passport or papers of any kind. The older he gets, and the more the world darkens, the more he yearns to travel back in time to that other world that is figured in his eyes and is lost.
Thank you, Volker. I also remember from reading the book, I read it again in preparation for this event. When I first read it 10 years ago, I couldn't guess that we once would sit here in Jerusalem on the same stage and speaking about it. I have noticed that, of course, you also rightfully mentioned that both of them were accompanied by women, but also rather different types of women. Stefan Zweig was, by then, he was living in divorcement, close to being divorced from his first wife. He had already his girlfriend with him, who was practically also his secretary, Lotte, who was considerably younger than him. And I think Joseph Roth met there, right, for the first time, Irmgard Coin, who was also an author, quite a successful German woman author, which was not happening too often then. And they were fond of each other. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, she kind of showed a certain distance to Stefan Zweig, who is supposed or reportedly was a womanizer. Very attractive man, and all the women were like, wow, Stefan Zweig, and so on. And he understands us. It's working until today. And
you tried sometimes? I mean, as a Stefan Zweig expert?
No, I don't have a mustache. And so, what can you tell us about this relationship, these relationships actually between Zweig and his new girlfriend / secretary, and Joseph Roth with Irmgard Coin, who was resisting the Nazis and fled there from Germany as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think there's one sentence from Irmgard Coin that I till now assume as one of the most romantic and nicest declaration of love, because she writes just some days after she met Joseph Roth for the first time. I have to say it in German first. Meine Haut hat sofort Ja gesagt. That is, so my skin said immediately yes. I found this so, my skin, I mean, the skin said yes to him. It was some kind of super attraction from the very first moment. And Joseph Roth at that time, well, it's not our job to judge it, but he was already a many-year alcoholic, and he was not so good off, not such a good shape, I would say, but she was just absolutely in love with him. And Irmgard Coin, if you don't know her work, she's just fabulous too. It's really you have to. Good. Yeah, maybe a few. Gilgi, eine von uns, for example. There are so fabulous books. And beside this, she was just such a courageous woman. I mean, she didn't have to flee Germany. She was non-Jewish. She was just, I mean, her books were banned, but she could have been living there. But he said, no, not without me. And another nice sentence, she said, behind me a country and in front of me the whole world. She was really open to the world. She was really open to exile. She was open to Ostend, and then yeah, it happened that she met Joseph Roth, and they kept on writing together. And Egon Erwin-Kisch said they are making some Olympic in writing, and they're making some Olympic in drinking. And she tries to take him away from drinking. He tries to attract her to drinking. And let's see who is winning. Obviously, Joseph Roth did win, and she was really a heavy drinker after that summer '36. Yeah, and Lotte and Stefan Zweig obviously is something completely different. It was a working, well, we don't really have to judge the romantic basis, but she was, I mean, his secretary at the beginning, and was some kind of a working relation at the beginning. And we were talking about this when I saw the last letter of Stefan Zweig of farewell. I mean, they committed suicide together in Petropolis. And there is this very, very touching, powerful farewell letter, and he didn't mention his wife, who was committing suicide with him. And still till today, we don't know why. Maybe he didn't take her serious. Maybe he didn't know that he would commit suicide herself. So it keeps a secret.
Yes. Indeed a secret, and I just remember whenever there are photographs, historic photographs showing Zweig with his wives, the first and the second one, there's hardly any sign of a real strong physical attraction by him to the woman next to him, and that I think this is remarkable. You see, he's sitting, and by chance there's someone else sitting next to him, and this is maybe the motif that goes on until his farewell letter, where he definitely does not mention her, not at a single word, saying thank you. You know, she was his secretary and typing his manuscripts and so on.
And you know, Stefan, I would like to come back to another aspect of what I read. This is this hell reigns from Joseph Roth, and this is another interesting thing about the relationship between those two, because Joseph Roth knew everything from the very beginning. What is going to happen? As he said, he tells Stefan Zweig letter by letter by letter what they're going to do. They're not going to sell your books, they're going to burn your books, they're going to ban yourself, and they're going to kill yourself. He told him letter by letter, and Stefan Zweig was, let's call him, I don't know, sunny-minded, optimistic. He just didn't want to see. And it is, and he hoped, well, he was Jewish, but he thought, maybe he's the only one who knows. Maybe Nazis don't know, or if he doesn't care, so it might not be a problem. At the beginning, he was really hoping that there might be some kind of a false reading. They might have meant Arnold Zweig when they burned Stefan Zweig's book in Breslau. He did write to Joseph Roth, oh no, must have been a grave mistake. They meant Arnold Zweig because he's a communist. They can't mean me. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not politician. I'm not political at all. Why should they burn my books? And Joseph Roth tells him letter by letter, they don't care. They don't care about politics. They care if you're a Jew or not. Yeah, and it took him some years, actually, Stefan Zweig, till he really understood what Joseph Roth meant.
Yes, and maybe that's also the different background, because Joseph Roth came from the Eastern European world, where pogroms were like, I wouldn't say daily event, but it happened from time to time, and Stefan Zweig was absolutely not exposed to that reality until the mid-1930s, and he couldn't imagine really what one day was going on.
And the Ostjude and the Westjude,
Yes.
as we said, and the so-called Westjude, they always thought they could look down on the Eastern Jews, and Joseph Roth once wrote in the essay Juden auf Wanderschaft, Juden on walk, I don't know, he wrote, Eastern Jews have nowhere a home but graves on every graveyard.
Yes. A part of your book, and I think this is in my eyes maybe the centerpiece, because it's really a very touching description of what maybe have happened. I don't know exactly, and I would like to hear also if this encounter, this specific encounter one night in the bar. All of your heroes are sitting together around a table, drinking, discussing, disputing, joking on each other, and so on. I think this is a brilliant part of your book. And first, could you read us a bit from that scene? And afterward, let's discuss it a bit.
Thank you. I'm not too sure which one you meant. Is it with the Olympics? Okay, good. On the one side, it's really nice listening to you talking about it. On the other side, I'm a bit of a problem for me, because since I have been publishing this book, I keep on talking, telling the people nothing is made up in this book. It's absolutely non-fiction. And it's true. Just this little passage, actually, is...
That was my suspicion.
Good.
It's really
but
nice.
So thanks a lot. But well, it's an invention, but it's so close to the possible reality. Is it possible reality? Can we say? Okay. Once again, they are sitting in the floor. This company in free fall, trying one more time this summer to feel like a group of vacationers, trying to pretend that they are carefree. Really, it's just a great long trip they have been on for years. Far from home, traveling with friends in Paris, Nice, Sanary-sur-Mer, Amsterdam, Marseille, Ostend, and at some point there'll be a return journey. But when? The more urgent this question becomes, the less often it is posed. With every day of this vacation that goes by, any return becomes less plausible. They all know it, but it's never discussed. Optimism is a duty. There is length of rope in the suitcase, but nobody talks about it. This is, you might know Ernst Toller, who used to be a really super successful playwright in the 20s. And yeah, he was carrying always, wherever he traveled in exile, he was carrying this rope with him in the suitcase. And some of you who know the life and death of Ernst Toller know that some years later, he used it in New York when he committed suicide in a hotel. Today, once again, they are all trying not to turn immediately to politics and pour over the ominous news of the day. But it's hopeless. There simply isn't anything to talk about that is not political. Egon Ewenkisch, the famous reporter, rasender Reporter, as we call him in German, has really been worldwide known during that time, tries it with sports, which with these days means Max Schmeling. Kisch has known and admired him for a long time. They were neighbors at the Scharmützelsee near Berlin. Kisch has attended many of his fights, and from a distance he has recently watched Schmeling refused to bow to Nazi pressure to separate from his Czech wife and his Jewish manager, Joe Jacobs. And Kisch has, of course, read everything about the fight in New York on June 19th and has been getting on everybody's nerves for days with his vocal admiration. The way Schmeling decked the brown bomber Joe Louis, and most of all, the way he impressed America even before the fight began with his bold, cool remark about a weakness of his opponents. I have seen something. That's the classic Schmeling understatement that Kisch loves so much. Ha! I've seen something, and as if I'd prepped him in advance, cries Kish. Modesty, self-possession, and mystery all in one sentence. Max is one of us. And he explains to the table all over again just what Max saw, that after attacking Joe Louis lets his left hand drop a little, and that this brief hole provides the critical opening for a counterattack. After 12 rounds, the supposedly unbreakable Joe Louis went down, and Kish loves to imitate the decisive punch the way he thinks it must have been. And now he's an advertisement in America for the Criminal Olympics, Kesten yells back, while Kish is still in full flood, which brings them back to the usual theme. The leading news out of Berlin these days is the preparation for the Olympic Games. The whole world will be coming to the German capital. The regime has been busy donning a disguise for weeks, divesting itself of the visible signs of anti-Jewish and anti-foreign policies and presenting itself as a civil state committed to international friendship. All forbidden to Jews signs have been taken down. And have you heard, asks Toller, Der Stürmer has been censored for weeks, not to remove any statements, just the anti-Semitic passages. Wonderful, so now they are selling blank paper, is Roth's bitterly mocking retort. In truth, this is the nub of their anxiety, that the world will allow itself to be deceived this summer in Berlin, that Goebbels will succeed in convincing the world of the Nazis' peaceable intentions and putting it to sleep, confirming its belief that Germany is harmless. England has just announced it intends to shrink its navy. The League of Nations has lifted the sanctions against Italy that had been imposed in wake of the conflict in Abyssinia. Mussolini's Italy celebrated, and Germany celebrated along with it. The world will sleep in order to live in peace, and the little group in Ostend hates its own powerlessness to the point of despair.
Thank you. So this meeting, this night meeting is in the description of Pfolker is going on, and it's full of jokes, and it is really, it reads as if there was a hidden microphone and someone recorded it and you did the spelling of this talk, and I really loved and enjoyed it, and that brought me also to the point where I asked myself, okay, it's non-fiction and he's clearly based on sources, so what were the sources and what actually gave you the first idea, the inspiration for this book? When this idea came up?
The inspiration of the book actually is in this book as well. It's just a photograph, the only one that shows both of them, and I love it really a lot. If you know the work of Stefan Zweig and Josef Roth, you might have seen it before, and this picture has been taken by Lotte Zweig in Ostend, and I think it presents just everything what I love about these two. But of course, I'm really happy about your question because I've been living with these two guys for years. Actually, I just wanted to study German literature because I love the books of Stefan Zweig so much, and I thought I have to know everything about it, and I want to learn everything about it. And when I started in Heidelberg in the 1990s, at the beginning, I got to know that Stefan Zweig obviously was not serious enough for German, for the Germanistic in Heidelberg. There was absolutely nothing, nobody, I mean, it's far too popular for Germanistic, so I didn't get to know anything about Stefan Zweig during my studies in Heidelberg and Berlin. But the good thing was that Stefan Zweig had so many friends, and so I decided to, well, I study about his friends then. And so I came to Josef Roth, and so I came to these two guys. I did write my master work about the letters between those two. So I've been really living with them for 20 years or so before I started to write the book. And yeah, and the research was just easy because I didn't go to archives. I didn't go so deep, like in the Leo Baeck Institute we were talking before now. So there are no many hidden traces that I found, but there was so much that has been published, all the letters and all the books, and it it was enough for me. That's good, anyway, for writing non-fictions about authors' lives who keep on, I mean, they're writing all day, and they leave traces all over the place, so it's quite easy not to invent anything.
Yes, that's correct, and in particular when it comes to such central figures like Stefan Zweig, where many of his letters written to others have been published and are accessible in a quite easy way, and there's also a special volume about the correspondence between both of them, Stefan Zweig and Joseph Roth, which appeared maybe 2 or 3 years before your book. And I guess you made use of that too, since it's really bringing it all together. It's quite a remarkable volume. It's about 500 or 600 pages or so, and I also studied it very intensively, and you see also the different attitude of how these two very different personalities kept their own records or the papers, letters received by others. I know that Stefan Zweig's letters to Roth are not completely preserved. There are huge gaps because Roth actually lost them, maybe lost them when he was...
sold them.
Sold them, yeah, whatever, yeah. And Stefan Zweig was keeping all his papers neatly together. And that brings me also to the point that the National Library, just briefly I would like to mention, that has a kind of personal relationship to Zweig, since he offered in late 1933 a good share of letters received by his contemporaries as a gift to the National Library in Jerusalem, and that was the cornerstone of our Stefan Zweig collection.
Yeah, and we were still guessing what kind of his letters he did present in 1933 to this library.
Yeah, Joseph Roth wasn't even offered to the National Library.
So, and I thought maybe, because among that was his letters with the communist Romain Rolland, for example, and Henri Barbusse, I think. So I thought, because I know he wasn't really courageous, especially in 1933, so he might have some political inconvenient letters just out of his house.
Yes.
Maybe, we don't know.
Maybe we don't know, yes, exactly. So, interestingly, and this is maybe less known beyond Joseph Roth's standing as a very popular and outstanding author, he was he converted actually to Catholicism. He was born Jewish, but has chosen a different way, and he was, despite the fact that the monarchy was gone, both in Austro-Hungary and in Germany, he was a monarchist and admired the Habsburg old days, good old days, the world of yesterday in Stefan Zweig's work, if you want to. And interestingly, towards the end of his life, close to the so-called Anschluss, the occupation of Austria by the Nazis in early 1938, he was traveling to Austria in order to being involved in politics and trying to sort out the things, which of course didn't work. So I was struck by that, and I would love to hear your opinion and maybe some details about that.
Yeah, coming back to the conversion question, I mean, he did convert from wherever he could. Conversion was kind of his idea of life. It's always Egon Evan Kish said at his funeral, there were all of them. There were the monarchists, there were the communists, there were the Jews, there were the Catholics, there were all of them, and they all thought, "This is my Joseph Roth. He's mine." And they obviously he was. Yeah, they were all right. And he started as a socialist with signing his journals with the Red Joseph. That was the beginning. Yeah, and he was the first refugee. He was the first author going to exile, obviously, because he knew everything when Hitler came to power. And he was the last Jew to invade or to come back to Austria. And I think it was 2 or 3 days before the Anschluss when he went to the Kanzleramt and said, "Well, I have a proposal. If you don't follow my proposal, Österreich is going to be a part of the Hitler regime, so you have to follow me. And my proposal is, I have good connections to the emperor, and he might, we get him back in a coffin and bring him back to the Hofburg, and when he's there, when he's back again, then everything is going to turn to be good. We're going to have the monarchy again, and Hitler's going to lose. Obviously, it was a poetic idea.
He was expecting that actually the presence of the emperor, if he would have been emperor, would stop Hitler from invading Austria.
Absolutely, and I find it absolutely convincing. No, it was, of course, it was an idea being born in literature. It was, I mean, he believed so strongly in his own works, in his own fantasy, in his own picture of the world as it should be, that he, at the end, well, alcohol might have been playing a role in this journey as well, but he believed in it, or he was so desperate, he knew there's no other chance, and I know this guy, and bring him back.
You mentioned when we started our conversation tonight the joint work on literature between Zweig and Joseph Roth, and in particular Zweig was writing maybe his most Jewish work at all, which is called The Buried Candelabrum, in Hebrew, just recently republished Menorah Tmuna, Der begrabene Leuchter in German. And that's a story, the fiction story, of course, of the menorah, menorah from the ancient temple. And at a certain point, Zweig was stuck with his writing, and he got assistance. And I think the sheer fact that he was able to accept the assistance by his friend really proves how deeply they were friends. Because this is, being a world-famous author, this is nothing that you really would accept easily, that you are stuck and someone else has to help you out, right? So, some words.
I don't know any example in literary history, actually, that and this is I said I didn't find anything in archives or so, this is true, but this piece actually I found, but I didn't have to look in archives, I just saw it in the letters. And it's just true. I mean, I don't know if Stefan Zweig really was stuck, but I know that there is one part in the very early edition of Letters of Joseph Roth, with is a little piece of prose in Joseph Roth's handwriting, and he is writing beside this, I'm glad to give you something back for all the good you do to me. And if you read this piece of prose just in this letter edition, you say, well, it's quite nice, but why? What is it about? Why is it? And yeah, and I found it. And I found that Stefan Zweig did put exactly this piece of prose, of literature, in the story. And he did write this story, Der begrabene Leuchter in Ostend, so it was a match. And I don't know if I begin the book with Stefan Zweig is stuck and he doesn't know how to go on. This is an invention too, but it must have been, because why else should he just put some piece of Joseph Roth prose in his own story?
Yeah, I think also that the fact what exactly this piece is that Joseph Roth wrote for Zweig, it's describing a very traditional convention of Jews, and this is really, I would call it maybe the burdened atmosphere by people sitting together and being afraid of what will most likely happen very closely, and trying to comfort each other by simply sitting together. And again, I think Roth's much more Jewish background, being an Ostjude who grew up in a shtetl and knew all these relations and situations, and Zweig, who was born in a palace-like townhouse in Vienna, was really light years away from that. And I think in order to describe this situation, that was definitely the perfect match, because Zweig would not have solved it, I guess.
Sure. And it's, yeah, incredible to see that at all Stefan Zweig, after 3 years of Nazi power, chose this topic at all, because as we saw, it wasn't important for him, the Jewishness. It wasn't important, but after 3 years of Nazi time, it became important, and he started to think about it.
Yes, that's right. And He definitely tried to find a new relationship to his own cultural and traditional roots, which were not really well developed. But you see that from the mid-1930s, when he also pointed out, after several attempts maybe to interact also a bit and to try to bit more on the front line of the political front line, as cautious as he was in those years, he came to the conclusion that this is not his power, and his only power could be and should be writing good literature. And he also encouraged others to do the same, because this is the only tool they actually have. So most of the protagonists of your book died close or soon after this encounter in 1936. A number of years later, most of them were dead. And Roth died in 1939, wrecking himself. Zweig committed suicide in 1942. Ernst Toller, you mentioned, also committed suicide. And yeah, so how, well, it's obvious what the reason was maybe, but still I would love to hear your words and your insights, how this very complex and hopeless political situation so deeply influenced the ways of life of these literary superpowers.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, by the will of the Germans, they should disappear. Yeah, and many disappeared. I mean, many died. And I've been, as I said, I've been writing this book about the first list for what was based on the May 33 book burning. And when I read this list for the first time, or I had a look at this list for the first time, I was so surprised. It happened after I had studied literature, after dealing years and years with exiled authors, but still I saw the list and saw that about 70% of these names I never heard of before. So they really disappeared, because many of them were at the beginning of the career, they didn't have a big audience, and they died within these 12 years. And there was nobody to remember them. And obviously, and especially in Western German society after that, there was no lobby for them, there was no interest in them. There were many of them who survived, like Alfred Deblin, or like Klaus Mann, or like some of them who really told themselves 12 years, let's survive, and then we go back, and then we build a new Germany, and then our work is going to be reread and put back into libraries. And of course it did not happen. And from today on, it's no surprise that it didn't happen, because the book burning wasn't something that the government invented or made up for by obvious reasons, but the intellectuals, the students did so, and it came from the center of the German society. So of course, after 12 years of fascism in Germany, there was no one, hardly anyone, who actually said, welcome back, we've been waiting for you. Nobody had been waiting for them. So even the survivors, even that ones who survived the time, like Irmgard Keun, for example, she was living in Western Germany, in Cologne for like almost 20 years, like a ghost. Not published, not known anymore, just forgotten, till Jürgen Serke, a journalist from Der Stern, came in the 70s, who made his first book about the burned books, and could visit her, and yeah, and she couldn't believe it, because she had been living 20, 30 years completely forgotten. Or what I'm just writing a book about in Germany now, super well-known and popular poet Mascha Kaleko, and
who lived here for a while.
Who lived at the end of her life. She came to Jerusalem for the last about 15 years or so of her life, and she really desperately tried to find an audience coming back to Germany, and she found for some moments, but actually not. And this is fine. Of course, this is my main idea of the book. First of all, I deal with literature from the very beginning, because I believe literature can change the world. It can change something. One of my books that I've been writing is about called Dreamers. That is about the poems who have been in power in Munich after First World War. There have been like half a year of the so-called Räterepublik, where really poems have been into power, like Kurt Eisner and Ernst Toller, that were mentioned already. So I really think they have power, and as I mentioned here, they thought by their writing, they could change something, and it didn't work out, but of course, in the basis of my belief and my reading, I do believe literature can change. And as I, once again, speaking about this farewell letter of Stefan Zweig, of course, I think this is it's not my right to say so, but for me, it is one of the documentaries of foundation for this state here, for Israel, because obviously, because of what happened here, the necessity of a safe space somewhere in the world for Jews was happened from stories like this, of course.
I think it's the last chapter of your book, which is called Mystery Train. You've chosen the title of this chapter in English, both for the German version, obviously for the English one, but it's also kept in the Hebrew version. So the book is translated 100% into Hebrew, except this name of the chapter, which describes a bit what happened to these figures that you so intensively deal with throughout your book. Maybe could you read maybe some parts of this last chapter to us?
And it's really, as we all know, it didn't end well. So for the end of an evening, it is. I don't know. Shall I read the whole? How much time do we have left?
We still have like 5 minutes, and.
Or maybe I just read the last sentence about the survivor. Many of you might know him. He's called Hermann Kästen. He's especially known by one book. Maybe he might find it tragical, but I find it really nice, because the one book he is well known till today is My Friends the Poets, and it's about his friends the poets, and all of them, most of them died, and none of them got an audience back. And so I just read the rest about him. And the last sentence is about Ostend of today is not much left of the buildings from that time. Has been destroyed actually by the Allies by bombing it. But there's one almost miraculous place with where the painter James Ensor, some of you might know him, who was born in Ostend and died in Ostend, and the place where he painted is still absolutely as if he just had left. So at the end, his name appears. The longest survivor was Hermann Kästen. He became an American citizen, lived in New York, later in Rome, and finally in Basel. The young German writers had no interest in him. The head of the Group 47, as you all know, the most influential group in Western Germany after the war, where Günter Grass came from, Hans Magnus Enzensberger, all these powerful men of after World War literature. The head of Group 47, Hans Werner Richter, who didn't want to have any emigres in the group, did actually invite Kästen and the critic Hans Saal one time. A mistake, as the former Wehrmacht soldier Richter wrote in his diary. I quote, "Neither of them tolerated any criticism. Both were full of sensitive, idiotic vanity. Both were expecting guilt complexes." End of quote. Kästen himself, in an assessment he made of German literature in 1965, complained of a certain intolerance among the new German writers for the former exiled authors, whom they no longer considered to be part of German literature or consigned to a kind of ghetto. Certainly a little group of the formerly exiled authors is somewhat sensitive, that is, those who are still alive. Kästen died in 1996, He was 96 years old. James Ensor died in November 1949 in his hometown at the age of 89. He's buried in the graveyard on the dunes of Ostend. From up there, you have a beautiful view of the sea.
Yes, thank you. One or two sentences about the Hebrew translation. Stefan Zweig is extremely popular in Israel over the last 15 years or so. And he's, believe it or not, 83 years after his suicide, he's the most translated German author in Israel.
Wow.
So it took a decade to find a publisher in Israel who was willing to translate this book. And I heard, in the meantime, I heard friends and colleagues who said, well, I don't understand. Volker Weydemann wrote such a brilliant book. Why it isn't translated into Hebrew? Why now?
But we are so, I mean, we're here to celebrate and to be happy and thankful. I don't know. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes it just happens. You know, I don't understand the international publisher business. I don't know. Sometimes it takes a book takes some time to make the trip around. I actually don't know how it at the end it happened, but it's my first book that has been translated so widely throughout the world. I think like in 25 languages or so by now, and it's just every time it's a new miracle. I don't know. I have nothing to do with it. Sometimes it happens. I get the letter from a publisher and say, "Oh, do you know something? I have to tell you." So I don't know. Maybe you know. Is that?
No, I actually have no background information, but I was simply curious about this strange phenomenon. Because whenever there's a new novella published by Stefan Zweig, it's immediately a bestseller, and people are talking about it, and it's reviewed in Haaretz and other newspapers. And okay, so I hope the same will happen to your book. And in a positive way, of course. And thank you very much, Volker Weydemann, for joining us tonight, for coming to Israel in general in these rather complicated days. We know that not all of your colleagues from the world were as courageous as you. And I think we all estimate that really highly and appreciate your appearance here. I can only thank also you, the audience. I can invite you to join us, maybe to say some words afterwards to our author and guest, and also to the bar and restaurant area at the entrance level upstairs. And thank you again, Volker, and thank you. Have a wonderful evening.